It's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the Tuesday, November 12th council meeting to order. And I think I missed one. Okay. I'd like for Ms. Johnson to lead us in the pledge, and we also have Boy Scout Troop 101 out of the Methodist Church joining us this evening. If they would come up and help out. That's my old scout troop many years ago.
Just a couple of years, right?
Just a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Oh, good. Maybe I can let you get back to. Okay, guys. Line up and face the flags over here. Yeah. Perfect.
Is that everybody? Okay. Ready? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
For it.
You're welcome.
Ms. Lees, would you give the roll call, please?
You were there. Present. Here. Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. O'Connor?
Present.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Present.
Ms. Wiles?
Present.
Mr. Ayers?
Present. Thank you. Approval of the minutes of the October 29, 2019 meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor.
I'd like to make a motion that we move miscellaneous number 1 to above new items for discussion or subsequent to approval of claims, however you would like to describe that, and everything else is submitted.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to move miscellaneous item number 1 to above the new items for discussion. This will be a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Do we need a vote or a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles.
I would make a motion that we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Petitions or comments by citizens who are present. I have none. If someone would like to speak, there's a form you can fill out right outside the door, and if you could hand it in to Ms. Lees, I would appreciate it. The mayor is not here this evening, so we don't have a mayor's report to council. I know he had a big weekend, and maybe he's resting from that. Council committee reports.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor.
I have one. The chair of the Finance Committee got here just at the nick of time, so I'll go ahead and follow through with the report on the Finance Committee. We met on the 7th, and most of the agenda this evening is a result of those things that were discussed in the Finance Committee, so I will not dally on this, but we talked about funding for Seminary Park, information technology, street capital improvements, also some of the other related items that you see on the agenda this evening, and some other financially related items. But frankly, the agenda is basically all the items that were discussed in the meeting, and the claims come to the council with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Any other council reports? Committee reports? The approval of claims.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving claims, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. New items for discussion. Council to consider ordinance, or I'm sorry, we have moved. We are going to go with miscellaneous number 1. Council to consider resolution RC-18-19, a resolution approving a tax phase-in for Project Green. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. President and council members, and thank you for moving this agenda item up. We appreciate that. If you recall, at your last council meeting on October 29th, you approved a resolution approving an economic development agreement between Nextspine LLC, Ellsbury Holdings LLC, and the City of Noblesville. Tonight, I'm before you requesting that you approve a resolution specific to the economic development agreement's real and personal property tax phase-in modeling. The request is for a 10-year real property tax phase-in on Nextspine's capital investment of $500,000 worth of new interior improvements and a 5-year personal property tax phase-in on an investment of $1.5 million worth of new and qualified personal property. Once again, I've included in your packet charts and modeling that explains Nextspine's project expansion details, as well as the request for a real and personal property tax phase-in. Our goal with this resolution is to retain and assist Nextspine with their need to expand operations. We want them to stay here and grow here in Noblesville. In the council chambers tonight representing this project are Andy Ellsbury, President of Nextspine, Matt Cole, Controller of Nextspine, and Scott Neal is the Senior Project Advisor for Genovis. If you have any questions or would like to ask any questions of those with the project, we're glad to answer them.
Any questions of Ms. Johnson? Any questions of the applicant? Must have done a good job, no questions.
Sounds great.
Do I have a motion?
President,
Mr. Boyce,
I make a motion that we approve miscellaneous number 1 RC-18-19.
Second.
it's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution RC-18-19. This will be a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your investment in Noblesville.
Back to new items for discussion. Council to consider ordinance 47-11-19, an ordinance approving additional appropriation from the Downtown Development Fund for design work at Seminary Park and establishing a public hearing.
Motion to
Mr.
introduce.
Mr. Spalding.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, City Controller. This first item in front of you, most typically an additional appropriation represents a new issue, new initiative, what have you. This one is not like that. This is more a housekeeping item than anything else. And it's basically addressing an issue that's related to all of the work that you've seen done at Seminary Park. And initially, there was approval by the, or recommendation by the Downtown District Committee to fund some design work from the Downtown Development Fund in 2018. But as a kind of a consequence of the timeline of events, that funding was neither put in place nor actually expended in 2018, but instead expended by the Parks Department in 2019. And so this is just basically reappropriating the $25,000 that lapsed in 2018 into 2019 to cover that expense by the Park Department.
Any questions of Mr. Spalding? Do I have a motion to establish a public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved to establish a public hearing for ordinance 47-11-19. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. We will talk about this in 2 weeks. Is the Mr. Spalding show tonight, so you can just stay. Council consider ordinance 48-11-19, an ordinance approving additional appropriation from the Motor Vehicle Highway, MVH Fund for Pleasant Street Design Phase 1 and establishing a public hearing. Mr. Spalding?
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, again, another additional appropriation request. This is more of the traditional type that you might see. This represents putting funding in place in the current budget year for some work related to the Pleasant Street project. And this This funding was not contemplated at the time the 2019 budget was adopted. So, since that time, we've reached a decision, put in place a plan, and that plan requires about $2 million of funding for design related to Pleasant Street. And this ordinance, this is a little complicated, we talked about it in Finance Committee. This ordinance is addressing one piece of putting that $2 million into the appropriate place. It puts $1,220,000. It makes $1,220,000 available toward that by, appropriating additional funds from the MVH fund. And there's another item later on the agenda that puts the other $800,000 in place that is a separate action but related to the same issue.
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles.
just for the council members, several years ago, we talked about setting money aside for the design of Pleasant Street. This is the actual action of appropriating those dollars to be able to implement that design. So this isn't an additional sum on top of what we've already talked about. It's just making the formal steps forward.
It was 2.75 million, I think, at the time.
I'm sorry, real quick clarification. 2.75 is in there now, and this is
No.
adding to that?
No.
We-
That's what we had talked about,
We
and I
talked
believe we
about it.
passed a resolution saying that we
remember
wanted to
that,
set
yeah.
aside those funds for it, but it was never officially set aside or appropriated. So this is just that act of actual appropriation.
Thank you.
Any other questions? With that, do I have a motion to establish a public hearing?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved to establish a public hearing for ordinance 47-11-19. This will be a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Council consider ordinance 49-11-19, an ordinance approving additional appropriations from the Downtown Development Fund for streetlight replacement in downtown Noblesville and establishing a public hearing. Mr. Spalding?
Motion to introduce?
Second.
Mr. President, members of the council, again, one more additional appropriation request here. And again, this is one part of kind of a two-act move to put in place $220,000 into the appropriate department budget. My phone, it's going to ring. Oh.
Or maybe.
Yeah, swipe down. It puts $220,000 into the appropriate place for those monies to be encumbered in 2019. And of that, you have a separate action later on the agenda that addresses $200,000 of that. And this is the additional $20,000. And based on the appropriations in place to date and the fund balance available in this fund, you had to do it through this two-step process to get $220,000 appropriated. So,
Any questions of Mr. Spalding? That, I need a motion to establish a public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved to establish public hearing for ordinance 49-11-19. This will be a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Moving on to transfers. Transfer number 1, council consider transfer TC-01-19, a cash transfer from the general fund to the motor vehicle highway fund to cover costs associated with Pleasant Street design. Mr. Spalding.
yes, Mr. President, members of the council, this is a rather infrequent thing that you'll see. We did one or two last year. These will be fairly rare. This is a cash transfer as opposed to the other items you'll see are appropriation transfers. I've chosen to take this approach because I think it's the most transparent approach to addressing what needs to happen here. And what this is doing is related to all the appropriations that we're talking about for the Pleasant Street design out of the MVH fund. That is the proper place to pay for that expense. But I think I certainly described this in the Finance Committee meeting. Basically, the way we manage our budget and our finances is we hold the cash balances in most funds relatively low and maintain our biggest cash reserves in the general fund and the rainy day fund. There's a number of reasons why that's done, but most of it is so it's kind of clear what, where to look for our cash reserves. And in this case, because of that and because of this expense is more properly funded out of the MVH fund, I'm taking some of those cash reserves, moving that cash to the MVH fund to be able to support the appropriations and the expenditures. So that's basically what it is. It's kind of a housekeeping move related to that other larger goal.
Any questions of Mr. Spalding?
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
I would make a motion that we approve transfer number TC-01-19.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve transfer TC-01-19. This will be a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0.
Mr. President,
Hold on for 1 second, Sam. Transfer number 2, council consider transfer TA-16-19, appropriation transfer in the motor vehicle highway fund to cover costs associated with Pleasant Street Phase 1 design.
Mr. President, council members, Sam Barris with Office of Finance and Accounting staff. So this transfer is the second part of one of the things Jeff discussed earlier. So this is also related to the Pleasant Street design. The ordinance you discussed earlier would appropriate an additional a little bit more than 1.2 million out of the MVH fund for that design work. This resolution covers the remaining $800,000 of that expense. So in this case, you would simply be moving money that was originally appropriated for capital expenditures into the 300 services and other charges line so that it could be appropriately used for these design expenses associated with Pleasant Street. So that's pretty much it. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Mr. Maris?
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor?
I make a motion that we approve transfer TA-16-19.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve transfer TA-16-19. This will be a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Miscellaneous, or transfer number 3, council consider transfer TA-17-19, an appropriation transfer in the Downtown Development Fund for the downtown signal design and streetlight replacement. Mr. Maris.
Mr. President, council members, this is another resolution that is attached to one of the ordinances that was discussed earlier. In this case, there's a request of appropriation authority of $320,000 for street light replacement and traffic signal design. The ordinance you discussed earlier would be an additional appropriation of $20,000 from the Downtown Development Fund for this purpose. So that $20,000 would increase the budget by $20,000. This covers the remaining $300,000, and again, this is just a transfer. So all you'd be approving here is moving $300,000 that's currently sitting in non-departmental contingency funds in the Downtown Development Authority, Downtown Development Fund for the traffic signals and street lights.
Any questions, Mr. Maris? With that, do I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
I would move that we approve transfer TA-17-19.
It's been moved and seconded to approve transfer TA-17-19. This will be a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Council to consider transfer TA-18-19, an appropriation transfer in the general fund for the Information Technology Department to cover the cost of a consulting service agreement. Mr. Maris.
Mr. President, council members, so this resolution deals with the city's IT department. As most of you probably are aware, there's been a recent change in how the city is going to be handling its IT needs going forward. So the main highlight of the change is that a lot of the IT needs of the city will be met through a contract with a private company. That contract started at the beginning of this month, so for 2019, there needs to be an appropriation to cover the 2-month portion of that contract. So as a result of this change in how IT services are being provided, there's going to be 3 employees that will no longer be on city payroll. So part of the contract for the final 2 months of the year comes out to about $110,000. Of that, $50,000 or so is going to come from personal services savings within the IT department. So it's just going to be reallocating money between the personal services line and the contract spending line of their budget. The remaining $60,000 is going to come from savings within the fire department's personal services budget. So in this case, as we're nearing the end of the year, there's some room in the fire department's personal services budget just due to vacancy savings, which is normal. In this case, all we're doing is we're taking that appropriation authority that's already been granted and moving it over to help cover the cost of this contract. So it wouldn't increase the budget. Again, it would just be transferring money from one place to another.
Any questions of Mr. Maris?
President,
Mr. O'Connor.
I make a motion that we approve transfer TA-18-19.
Been moved and seconded to approve transfer TA-18-19. This will be a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 9-0. Any council comments? I have one. Ms. Krupski, we spent a lot of money tonight
Yeah.
on good stuff. How are we doing on Pleasant Street? I know you didn't want to come up here, that's why I asked.
I figured. So this morning at the Board of Works, we signed a contract with American Structure Point to move forward with phase 1 of the design, which is from River Road to 10th Street. That contract also includes all of phase 1, 2, and 3 for the environmental, the utilities, and the geotechnical. So the amount might have looked really large for phase 1, but it also includes some of the bigger picture items that we need to do for phases 2 and 3, so we don't waste money down the road. Our goal, obviously, we are applying to the NPO for 2025 federal funds. If we get that, that will be awesome. We'll try to move that money up, and so we can get it constructed as soon as we can. If we do not get awarded federal funding, our goal would be to have it in construction by 2024 using local money. So our design will be going much faster than what the federal funding amount will go, just so that we can, if possible, if we have to use local money for the entire project, we can move it up.
Thank you.
Very
You're
quick
welcome.
follow-up. Public communication,
Uh-huh.
what's the best place for people to track what's being done?
Yeah, so part of the fee that we contracted with Structure Point is a public outreach portion. So obviously, they can come to me with any questions that they have, but we will be setting up a regular public communication plan. That has not been set up yet, but part of the contract today will be to get that in place, so.
If we get federal funding, then they will have someone responsible for that also.
They will have somebody responsible for the federal portion of that.
Okay.
I think that locally we'll want a little more outreach than what they'll require, so.
Thank you. Any
Yep.
other questions? Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other council comments? I have none. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Then move to adjourn. All those in favor, raise your hand. We are adjourned.